This is podcast 2 about teaching all children. As physical educators, we teach just about all the children and or students that are in the school. So we need to know and be aware of the fact that sometimes we treat students differently because of the way they look or the way they act. We need to try as best we can to teach all children in the same way and to try to reach them in different ways because they all learn in different ways. So that's an important thing to remember as physical educators. It's also important to remember that physical education and sport have traditionally been a very patriarchal institution. We reflect society and remember that as people we have been socialized by our parents and by society and by our friends and by other people that we meet to function in this society. And sometimes we learn about prejudices and we don't even know that that's happening. So those prejudices are learned and they can also be unlearned. Looking at schools altogether, the K through 12 student population is more diverse than it's ever been in our history, and their abilities are varied, particularly in physical education as we look at physical abilities. 40% or more of the K-12 population right now are students of color. 95% of the teachers in physical education are white, middle class, and overwhelmingly female for the most part. What are teachers' biased expectations based on the diversity of their students? Many times teachers are unaware of the biases that they have. In this class on diversity issues in physical education, we're going to try to uh, see if we can get an awareness of possibly treating students differently because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation, their religion, their obesity, their skill level, etc. There are many types of diversity issues that physical educators deal with every day. Inclusion is a word that's often used in regard to children with disabilities, but we have to think about our classes as all being adapted physical education classes where all children feel safe, successful, motivated, and connected, and that they have a sense of ownership over their own learning. We want to have an inclusive environment in our classes that involve a healthy learning environment where all children feel like they are safe and they are learning something that is related to their abilities, and are sometimes modifications have to be made when learning tasks don't meet the basic needs of children. In other words, we need to modify the tasks according to students' abilities and learning styles. Some concerns for diversity in physical education are the racial ethnic divide. If someone thinks that we do not still have problems with race in this country, you haven't been paying attention lately. In physical education, often when you're teaching in a weight room, you'll have the class waiting for you in there, and they're sitting according to different races. All of the white kids will be on one side and all of the black kids will be on the other. That happens, but we need to try to get through our organization of our classes to get students to know each other and get to know other people that don't look like them. Because we have a patriarchal tradition in sport, in other words, men were always allowed to participate in sports up until the 1970s, and girls were not allowed to participate in sports at all. So there is an inherent gender bias in physical education just because of that history and tradition. However, because of Title IX, now girls get more opportunities to participate in sports, and therefore they are getting better and their skill level is getting better. The physically disabled are historically disadvantaged, particularly in access to public buildings, and I can think of a few buildings, and you can probably think of a few buildings on this campus and other campuses that are not accessible to people with physical. One aspect in physical education that is particularly important to think about are students with obesity or overweight. Sometimes they also have low ability levels in physical abilities, and we have to think of those things. Those are pretty much unique to physical education. There are also those who practice different religions who have different ideas or cultural aspects related to physical activity. In addition, the locker room in the gymnasium also seems to be a place where bullying gets originated. So we have to think about that. And also sexual orientation in regard to being also in the locker rooms. This slide is particularly interesting because if you think about diversity across the world, if we could shrink the Earth's population to a village of 100 people, it would look like this. There would be 57 Asians. So the population of the United States is actually small compared to the Asian nations. 21 Europeans, 14 North and South Americans, and 8 Africans. 70 would be non-white, 70 would be non-Christian. 50% of the entire world's wealth would be in the hands of 6 people. Probably Oprah Winfrey and Bill Gates are probably 2 of those 6. 70 would be unable to read, which means 70% of the world is actually illiterate. 50 would suffer from malnutrition, 80 would live in substandard housing, and only 1 would have a college education. That means that those of us that have a college education are very fortunate to have it. The demographics of the United States as of 2013 are 316 million. 65% are white, 12.9% African American. The next highest minority group is 15.1% Hispanic, 4.4% Asian or Native Hawaiian, 1% American Indian, and actually biracial children are now a higher population than American Indians. When you think about urban versus rural people and where they live in the United States, only 13% live in rural areas. 87% of the population live somewhere in urban or suburban areas, and you can see the East Coast is the most populated. This very short description of a PE class gives an imaginary idea of the diversity that we have in a physical education class and how we need to meet the needs of all of those different students in our classes. This slide of the status of the United States children is very disheartening sometimes because it shows that there are many more poor children in this country, and there are many homeless children in this country, and those are the ones sometimes that we are having in our classes in physical education. It's important to remember this as we become future teachers.